Racism is not going to go away anytime soon. So the question is, what do we do when faced with it? Because racism is like a cancer, eating you up inside, shutting you down, robbing your voice, stealing your power. If you let racism eat you up, it can lead to all sorts of harmful behaviors, addictions, abuses that you unleash against yourself and others. We can refuse to be a victim of racism by not taking it upon ourselves, not letting it shame us. When encountering people projecting racism and discrimination, know that the problem is not you, it's them. It's not only Aboriginal people as individuals who experience racism and abuses of their basic human rights, but First Nations communities do as well. I witnessed a disturbing example of this and a powerful response to it on a national level when the Quebec government was threatening to separate from Canada, but with little thought about the consequences of that for the First Nations of Quebec. The powerful response came from former AFN National Chief Ovid Mercredi when he met with a committee of the Quebec government studying options for separation, and he took them on, using his voice to defend and protect the rights of the Quebec nations.
The drum is part of our society, part of our way of life, and if the drum is not allowed in the assembly, we will not be in the assembly.
Tansi, Oki. I'm Gil Cardinal, a filmmaker. This headdress comes from the Blood Reserve at Standoff. It was given to me in proper ceremony in recognition of a film I made about searching for my natural family. I now use the voice I have as a filmmaker to tell the stories of our people, our communities, so that their voice can be heard. But for me, it wasn't always so. I was very quiet in my youth and early adulthood as a result of the times in my life that I experienced racism, discrimination. Experiences that not only caused me pain and shame, but that gradually shut me down, silencing my voice. My experiences were those of the 50s and the 60s. Roseanne Supernault is an actor now featured as the character Natalie Stoney in the APTN dramatic series Blackstone. I met with her in the Blackstone editing room to talk about racism and discrimination. What has changed, or more to the point, hasn't changed since my time and my experiences, and Roseanne's more current time, her experiences.
How do you feel about your future in Blackstone?
My future? What future?
Well, it's the cycle. It's residential school syndrome. It's the 60s scoop. It's the genocide.
My mother, Lucy Cardinal, went to one of those schools. And though she, like many thousands of others, was a survivor, she, like they, really didn't survive the experience at all. perhaps physically surviving. But surviving the intense damage done there became a life-altering, spirit-numbing struggle with day-to-day life thereafter.
After everything that happened through residential school syndrome, or residential schools, and then afterwards you have this cycle developing. So you have kids now who are messed up. And I was that way too when I was a teenager. It was like roadblock, always, constantly. And I couldn't figure it out. I was like, why is my life like this? And you develop this paradigm that it's just because I'm Native. And that's the way it is, because I'm Métis, because I'm Native. But that's not the truth. The truth is, my grandmother, my great-grandmother went to residential school, and they were abused. They bring that sickness and that disease home. But we have to realize that we're part of a cycle and that it's our responsibility to break out of that cycle.
In watching the committee watch the dancers, I quickly became impatient with their impatience over a simple demonstration of cultural expression that was symbolic of and paralleled the very same respect they demanded from the rest of the country.
Owing to the personal legacy of the residential school in my mother's life, she eventually drifted to the city and had what I understand to have been a rather unsettled lifestyle, to the point that I was apprehended by the police and turned over to child welfare authorities. So owing to the residential school system and the racism behind it, this was my first, though indirect, encounter with racism and discrimination. It was a time when Aboriginal women could be considered loose if they wore makeup or lipstick, and they could have their children taken away from them on those grounds alone. I have this official transcript of the Juvenile Court of Northern Alberta, dated Edmonton, June 7th, 1951. At the hearing to determine my fate, the judge's prejudicial attitude towards my mother was clear. Though Lucy had a plan to take me to her grandmother's in Slave Lake, the judge told her, and I quote, "If over the weekend there are a lot of parties here and you get tight at a party and in a jam and get picked up, I'm going to make this baby a ward." And they did. As it turned out, Lucy didn't take me to her grandmother's in Slave Lake. I don't know what happened, but I make no judgments of her. How can I know what was happening for her at that time, especially given what I now know about the effects of residential schools on our people?
I believe that racism itself is this negative force, this sort of entity in itself. And when you come up against it and when you face it, and I think every Native person does face it at one point or another in their life, because as a young person, I was struggling from it. I was letting it defeat me. I let it take my energy, and it did. It took my energy for a very long time.
As a foster child, I was luckier than most. I only had 4 placements before arriving at what became my last home at the age of 3. Though my Native identity was not discussed or nurtured, it was a good home. I didn't even know I was Native until I was about 10 or 12 and got into a bit of a scrap with a playmate down the street. Well, he went home crying, and 5 minutes later, his mom was at our door yelling at my foster mom. "I don't want that dirty Indian playing with my son anymore." Well, this was news to me that I was an Indian, much less a dirty one. And there began the years of my youth, marked by being ashamed of being Native. Something we must not allow discrimination and racism to do to us.
Nice job, Mom. It was a great first day.
A lot of it happened when I was in high school, and there was a huge, just a vast amount of cultural insensitivity. I got asked by boys if I wanted to squaw wrestle. I got told to go live in a teepee. There were points where they said, "Yeah, no, you're an Indian. It's okay to call you that. It's just a name." And to them, it's just a name. But to me, it's like, that's our identity. I remember one time I was in a class, and it was a drama class, acting class. And we were doing this thing called playtime. And then suddenly, in the midst of it all the chaos, I look over at my friends, and they're in character, or they're just being themselves, and they said, "Let's have a powwow." None of them are Native. They're all non-Native. They went about the classroom, they found paint, and they drew war paint on their faces, and they started having what their idea of a powwow was right in the middle of the classroom. There was so much pain because these were my friends. And it hurt a lot. And that was the point of voicelessness, because they were my friends. So why is it that at that point in time, your dignity is not as important? It seems more important at the time to keep the friendship. And that's something I learned along the way, is that you just have to speak up.
This is the statement of my people. It is not the statement of the national chief. The tone is hard, but so is the problem that we have to deal with. It's very difficult. It's very hard on my people not to know what's going to happen with their future in this province. And it's hard for us to accept that another distinct group in Canada can make decisions for us, and they will invite us to a committee to scold us, not to listen, not to embrace our vision, but to tell us that we have no business in their destiny. It's hard for us to sit back, so we have to come out from the bush and to tell you, not that you must stop your aspirations, but you have to question them in light of ours. And that if you are really genuinely interested in human rights, in creating a better society in the province of Quebec, you will not violate ours, because that is your first test, is how you treat us before you separate, not how you treat us after you separate. Because after, for my people, is too late.
If you don't speak up, then what happens? And just internalize the abuse? Do you feel shameful? Do you put yourself, emotionally in some small little corner and kind of hide there? What happens?
I think that you start to blame yourself, and if you don't deal with it, it's almost like a snow globe, when you shake up, it just settles at the bottom, and anytime it comes up again, it's all up there, and it comes up. But if you don't project it out and you don't deal with it in healthy ways, it stays in here. And I think it turns into shame. That's why so many young kids are ashamed.
Well, I guess if you just let it build up and just sit inside, internalize it, let it sit there, it becomes toxic.
Yes.
It becomes like a cancer.
Yes.
But I got through my teenage years relatively okay, until my next encounter with discrimination. I was in grade 9, and though my marks were relatively okay, I was told I wasn't being put into a high school matriculation program, which meant university eligibility, but instead was being put into a general program. I was told they didn't think I was university material, that I wouldn't do well there.
And what started off that gas sniffing?
That gas sniffing?
Doesn't get any better.
My grandfather's death.
The more times you watch it.
Your grandfather died too?
Why are you packing?
My grandmother died in June.
You don't actually believe you can live on your own, do you?
Roseanne is not only using her voice as a character on a television show. She had struggles with racism, but didn't let those experiences defeat her. Now Roseanne uses her voice doing workshops with Native youth. She has a message for them, indeed for us all. She wrote it down and wanted to read it for us.
What I hope for and wish for people to truly understand is that racism is a monster. These entities of darkness that haunt our people, they are monsters that we must starve. When you feed something with your anger, you are only giving it more energy. That monster will not feed off of love, but it will feed off of hatred and anger. It will feed off of your shame, your pain, and we must starve that monster. The only way to starve that monster is to love. We must love ourselves, love our family, our friends, and our children. We must love our lives. We must accept our brothers and sisters of different colors who walk this world with us. We must starve that monster with kindness and courage and hope.
And if I may, I know that you have said certain comments before I arrived about the nature of our leadership. I will not say much, except to say to you that when someone bargains hard, he's a champion for his people. René Lévesque was a champion for his people. No one said, don't bargain too hard. I intend to bargain as hard as I have to for the rights of my people. And you can say all you like to try to dampen my spirit, but you will not succeed.
Provocateur, Provocative, charged Jacques Broussard of the separatist Parti Québécois. Your remarks are inflammatory. You show no respect for the people of Quebec or for Quebec itself.
La conclusion d'entente.
Understand that we're not here to paint you in a negative way. We're here to assert our rights, and that is all that we're here to do. Whether you accept it or not is a different issue. That shows we have a lot to talk about. We said we have rights that are very important to our people. But to say things in the same way you say them, I know what, and you're going to say to me, you can do it, but we can't? Listen, if you're going to be a strong advocate for your people's rights, so am I.
All of us have a light inside of us.
It's not only a national chief taking on a government committee who can defend our human rights as Aboriginal people, but it's what we can all do to protect ourselves, our families, our communities, and our nations. We have a fundamental right to be who we are.
Because that is true survival.